On November 24, 1971, a man in a business suit boarded a Boeing 727 with a bomb in his briefcase, and nobody's ever found him. What makes this case so different from every other skyjacking in history isn't the audacity. It's that we know almost nothing about who he was, and that gap between what happened and who did it is exactly what kept investigators chasing shadows for 50 years. Let me walk you through the timeline because the details matter more than the legend. November 24, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve. Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 departed Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 2:50 p.m., bound for Reno, Nevada. 36 passengers, 6 crew members, 2 flight attendants. The aircraft climbed to cruising altitude with no indication that anything unusual was about to unfold. 20 minutes into the flight at roughly 3:05 p.m., a man seated in row 18 wearing a dark suit, black sunglasses, and carrying a briefcase approached flight attendant Florence Schaffner. He handed her a note. It read, "I have a bomb." He opened his briefcase just enough for her to see what looked like dynamite wired to a battery. The moment she read those words, everything changed. But the passengers around him had no idea yet what was happening. Schaffner kept her composure. She asked his name. He told her, Dan Cooper. He demanded $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a map. He said if his demands weren't met, he'd detonate the device. The captain, William Scott, was notified immediately. Scott knew this wasn't a hoax, not yet anyway. He radioed air traffic control and told them to prepare ground personnel in Seattle. Here's what the passengers didn't know. The captain was already planning how to buy time. He decided to circle the Seattle area, burning fuel and extending the flight. He needed to keep Cooper on that aircraft long enough for authorities to assemble the money and parachutes. Every minute in the air was a minute to think, to prepare, to hope something went wrong with his plan. By 5:24 p.m., 2 hours after Cooper's initial demand, the aircraft landed at Seattle-Tacoma. An FBI team was waiting. Ground personnel delivered a suitcase containing $200,000 in used $20 bills and a bundle of parachutes. Cooper released 2 passengers in exchange, a young boy and his mother. He kept everyone else aboard as insurance. The plane was now refueled and ready to move. Cooper ordered the plane into the air again. He instructed Captain Scott to keep the landing gear down, the flaps lowered, and the speed at 200 miles per hour, the slowest safe speed for 727. He wanted to be able to jump and survive. By 8:00 p.m., the aircraft was airborne again, flying north toward the Canadian border, somewhere over the dark forest between Seattle and Portland. Cooper lowered the rear stairs and disappeared into the night. He was never found. The FBI launched what became known as Northwest hijacking. Agents interviewed hundreds of suspects. They collected evidence. They pursued leads across the country, but Cooper had vanished like smoke. The money suitcase, the parachute harness, the briefcase, none of it was ever recovered. Just one thing found in 1980 gave investigators a thread to pull. A young boy playing along the Columbia River near Portland found $5,800 of the ransom money buried in the sand, partially decomposed. It was the only physical evidence that Cooper had actually jumped, but it raised more questions than it answered. How much of the money was lost? How far did he travel? Did he even survive the jump? The forest where he likely landed was dense, dark, and unforgiving. Over the decades, the case became legendary. True crime enthusiasts, amateur investigators, and former FBI agents all took cracks at identifying him. Robert Rackstraw, Kenneth Christiansen, Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., Dan Cooper himself, if that was even his real name. Each theory had evidence, none had proof. The briefcase he carried, the bomb itself, if it was even real, was never found. But here's the irony that museums like this one find so compelling. Cooper never killed anyone. He didn't harm a passenger or crew member. He was polite, even courteous. He wore a parachute that may or may not have worked. He jumped into darkness over terrain he couldn't see. By all reasonable measures, he should have died that night. Yet his legacy became something nobody predicted. He became a folk hero. Not because he succeeded, we don't even know if he did, but because he represented something. An impossible crime, a perfect mystery. A man who walked onto an airplane, made his demand, and vanished. No name, no face, no closure. The 727 itself, the aircraft he flew, became historically significant. It was the only commercial jet ever hijacked by a man who escaped with ransom money and was never caught. That specific aircraft was retired and eventually scrapped, but its place in history was cemented. Every pilot who flew a 727 after November 24, 1971 knew the story. In 2016, the FBI officially suspended active investigation into the case. Not because they solved it, but because the leads had dried up. The statute of limitations had passed. Cooper would be in his 90s by then, probably dead most likely. But the mystery remained unsolved. The museum keeps this telegram right here from the Seattle field office dated November 24 at 9:47 p.m. It reads, "Subject missing. Parachute deployed, whereabouts unknown." What fascinates us most, I think, is that gap between the facts and the legend. We know what happened on that aircraft. We know he demanded money. We know he jumped. But we don't know who he was, where he went, or whether he survived. That uncertainty is what keeps the case alive 50 years later. The Cooper case changed aviation security forever. Cockpit doors were reinforced. Stairs were locked. Passenger screening tightened. One man's audacity, one dark November night, and one perfect mystery reshaped how we fly. He may never be identified, but his impact on the world is undeniable. So what really happened to D.B. Cooper? We may never know, and perhaps that's exactly why we can't stop asking. The mystery is the whole point. Subscribe, we're uncovering one unsolved aviation mystery every week, and there are cases with even stranger details waiting. Subscribe, we're uncovering one unsolved aviation mystery every week, and there are cases with even stranger details waiting.